For a lot of people, it feels like it has to be a full-time job to actually maximize these credit cards.
If you've ever felt like travel is getting more expensive, more confusing, and somehow harder to enjoy, you're not alone. Hidden fees, dynamic pricing, and endless options can make even the simplest trip feel overwhelming. But what if you could travel smarter, unlocking incredible experiences and maximizing every dollar while turning the system in your favor? Today, we're joined by Zach Griff, a travel expert, Wharton MBA, and former senior voice at The Points Guy, who's visited 67 countries and built a community of over 350,000 followers by simplifying the world of points, airlines, and travel strategy. If you want to travel better, spend less, and experience more, this conversation is going to change how you think about every trip you take. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Mitlin Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Mitlin Financial. Let's dive into the show. Well, I am super excited today to have Zach Griff with us and share his journey with all of you. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm so excited we're able to do this. And, we'll talk a lot about from the trade table. But before we jump into that, can you share with our listeners a little bit about your journey to embarking and becoming an entrepreneur? Our listeners really find that part of people's journey really fascinating.
Yeah, my journey really starts about a decade ago. It's crazy. My parents are doctors. They're Jewish. They fully expected me to become a doctor or a lawyer, as classic as it gets. But I went to college, I studied economics, and I just never felt that medicine was my calling. And, I didn't really know what to do. So I went to go work in consulting like any good young recent college grad who's undecided about what he wants to do with his life does. And it was during that time, actually, when I was working there that I found The Point. I had been following The Points Guy, which is kind of my first real big employer. But I had found that this job opening, they called it a travel analyst. I had no idea what that meant, but what I did know is that I love to travel. I had already a few credit cards. I was already using points and miles and all the cool things. And I was like, okay, well, this is a brand new company basically that is hiring, and I might as well give it a try and see what happens. And really the rest is history, because I spent a little bit close to like 8 years, crazy, working there. And then I decided to launch my own thing and go independent. This is where the world is right now. I had built up a brand on social media. It touches over 350,000 followers. Folks were recognizing me in airports and hotels and lounges, and they really liked the content I was producing, both the writing and kind of the video stuff that I do on social. And so that's when I decided late last year to launch From the Trade Table, which is my new newsletter that I write 3 times a week, all about travel and points and miles and, financial, hacking, for lack of a better word, just how to become a better person at all these things. And I've got my social, which I do every single day.
Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your journey, in terms of at The Points Guy, where you started, and then we'll talk about From the Trade Table. You were one of the early employees of The Points Guy, right? Do you even know what employee number you were or no?
Yeah, so I was absolutely one of the earliest. It's crazy to think about it. When I joined Points Guy, I was in kind of a small WeWork style office. It was just around the time when it had kind of its first major acquisition. And what I had known, though, at the time is how much I love the brand, because I love to travel. I love credit cards. I love points. And I had really used my time at The Points Guy to launch kind of the platforms that I've launched, today. And it's funny because a lot of people think of me as, the name Zach Griff from The Points Guy. They saw my name in articles or on their social feeds, on collaborative posts or whatnot. But really, when I joined, I joined as something called a travel analyst. And my job was kind of very back end. I was not at all public facing. I was in charge of basically creating models for valuing points. How does, and this really ties into a lot of the work I was doing in consulting and management consulting at the time, which was, look at a spreadsheet, build a model. I mean, I wish I had AI back in the day. I would have been so much faster. But if you have a delta point, how much do you value it at? And can you actually put data behind that as opposed to just kind of pulling a number from a hat? And that's what I did for a few months. And I built the model, right? And once a model is built, it doesn't really take that much time to kind of update it. And it was my decision to basically pitch and say, hey, well, I really like this stuff. I don't want to leave. I don't really want another back-end job. I would love to either write or post on social media. And how can I turn all that I know, this kind of knowledge, into content? And I really feel that, over the many years, I found like my voice in my brand and throughout kind of all the content that I post.
Yeah. So, I mean, at what point, right, it sounds like things are humming, right? You started out in this kind of behind the scenes role at the Points guy. You move out to more of a public facing role. You kind of get into your rhythm there. When and how does this decision come about to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to leave this security of the Points guy, my role there, and now I'm going to launch from the trade table, and I'm going to do this for me and myself and my family?
Yeah. So, I mean, a few things. A lot of people don't even realize this, but I actually went to go get a full-time MBA. So I went to Philly, I went to Wharton, went to the 2-year traditional MBA program. And most people don't realize it because I was still working part-time for the Points guy, which is so funny because so few of my kind of colleagues or friends in the MBA program, they have left their jobs and really kind of leaned in fully into getting their MBA, which is great. But, for me, my brand is so much about travel and what's happening. And if I were to just kind of disappear and go dark for 2 years, that would, in my mind, that would not be great for continuity. So I decided that I would continue kind of working part-time and again, people forget that I was in Philly doing this thing because I was posting so much because I love this stuff. And I think like that's one of the key lessons and unlocks that I've had throughout my career so far is just, pursuing the thing that you are most passionate about. And I know it sounds so cliche and everyone says, oh, go do what you love. But I truly every single day feel like I am doing what I love. And I don't get tired of it. I mean, it is exhausting and people don't see that. But so what? Because I'm really doing what I love. But that said, so when did I decide kind of, getting the MBA for me, it was really about reinvesting in my career and deciding what I wanted to kind of do next. And one of the things that I started to realize as, my kind of time at TPG was coming to an end, especially during this part-time phase, is I was putting in so much, whether it was written content, social content, and by the end, right, I had kind of tapped out a lot of like where I could grow in my social accounts. People knew who I was. I had the network of folks who work at, the airlines and credit card companies and hotels that know who I am. And so, I could continue doing this forever, but why not challenge myself and say, okay, well, this is great. I've built all this up and let's see if I could kind of do that on my own.
So, one thing that I heard you say loud and clear is this is something that you truly love. You really enjoy it, right? And you really are leaning into it. Was travel something that was part of your upbringing that really kind of left an indelible mark that you're now continuing? Or is it something that you just found later in life as you started to embark on your career?
Yeah. So I always say that I first got the bug, let's say. My dad came home one day with a mailer from Amex and it said, sign up for a card and get, 75,000 points or whatever. And I was in high school at the time, I think maybe a sophomore or junior. And, at that stage in life, I was playing sports, having fun with friends, and I wanted something else. And this sounded so interesting. And that's really when I started doing research around just basic Google searches, I started seeing kind of the infancy of the Points guy. Really, that was really the only blog at the time talking about this stuff. And that's when I, started learning. I was diving into Reddit forums. We ended up signing up for the card. I then made a redemption. We went, we took one trip to the Middle East. We had gone to Israel, and then we went, I think, also to South America. I think maybe to Argentina on like a points deal or some like really cool thing that I certainly wouldn't have been able to ever afford or unlock. It was in business class, which was was unheard of for my family. And as part of that, I was like, okay, well, this is awesome. And then I started really in college. It's funny, in college, most people don't actually know this. I did like consulting on the side with regards to points and miles. And so, twofold. One, I would pay the rent of all the houses in the neighborhood off campus because I would earn the points on it. And then, people would send me, cash or checks or Venmos. And I would only do it with folks I trusted because that was, especially at the time, a $3,000 or $4,000 rent was a significant amount of money to kind of front. But twofold is, as part of that, my name kind of got around campus as, oh, this guy knows what he's doing with points and miles. And so people would approach me with questions on, spring break travel or what parts to sign up for. And that's when I really started to realize, like, okay, this is not only something I like, but there's seemingly a market of folks who want to understand this better. And the existing solutions that are out there, whether that's just, basic blogs, are not kind of, people haven't discovered them yet, let's say.
Sounds like it really started steamrolling when you were in high school and into college and then right out of there. Now, I mean, your time in the travel hacking space has given you many inside looks that I feel like a lot of people necessarily may not have. What have been some of the coolest things that you have seen, in your years in the travel hacking, for lack of a better word, space?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because I'd say it's usually hard to pinpoint one or two things. I mean, one of the things that's really wild and cool is, I think that I've had multiple iterations of travel, and I still have multiple personas, right? During the week, I'm often traveling alone or, maybe with a friend or a colleague, not even a colleague. I'm a one-man show, but, some former colleagues, which is always fun. And those are kind of very much, I'm the quintessential business traveler. I'm getting to the airport, going to the lounge or going straight to the gate, doing my thing. And then we have a 1-year-old daughter at home, which is new, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I've done we as a family have done a ton of traveling, whether it's to grandparents in Florida or just kind of, around the country and really the world. And that's a new style of travel for me. And to kind of backdoor into that question about, what are some really cool things? United recently announced this like relax row is what they're calling it, which is basically you take 3 economy seats, you flip up like leg rest, and then it becomes this like bed surface. And it went super viral. I was there for the announcement and obviously posting about it and whatnot. But that is the type of innovation that is, it's not necessarily new because, Air New Zealand, which is a carrier obviously of New Zealand, has had this for a while. But to bring that to the United States and make it like really mainstream, for sure this year's highlight for me, especially as this new like kind of newfound family traveler. But I've done some crazy stuff. I mean, I have flown to Dubai for 6 hours, just to be in like Emirates first class and, taking a shower on the plane and checking out brand new hotels that are, accepting 40,000 points for a night at, a Park Hyatt in New York, which is, super 5-star. I've had, unbelievable experiences, but, we haven't really talked about this, but like for me, a lot of this is great and I love it, but some of the best trips are family, friends, even if it's just going to the national parks, getting outside, staying closer to home, hiking, whatnot. Like I love the outdoors. I've actually kind of newfound runner. It's funny. I got hooked on running because airlines, United and hotels, they sponsor like races and stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I enjoy exercise, and what would it be like to run a marathon and run a half marathon? And so that's become my new thing. It's harder with a 1-year-old at home, but it's all good stuff.
Listen, I think a lot of listeners probably are new to maximizing travel rewards. I think a lot of people hear about it, but there are also a lot of people who haven't dove into it and given it a shot. So for the people who are new to maximizing travel rewards, what are your top 3 things that listeners should focus on to get meaningful results from maximizing travel rewards?
Kind of the first thing to remember is that before you play anything in this game, and this is obviously kind of a money mindset, right? So pay your bills on time every month. Like I don't think you need me to say that, but if you want to get any value from, the minute you start kind of racking up any type of credit card debt, it just none of this makes sense. So with that out of the way, first real thing is credit cards are largely the greatest unlock there is to getting kind of really fast track your earning of points, right? Because you could go and fly forever and still only earn, enough points for a free flight down to Florida or something like that. But with the credit cards and sign up bonuses, those intro offers, those are really kind of the ways to really fast track your earnings. So with all that said, I'd say one, make sure that you are being intentional and specific around, whether it's a points currency, so like you're signing up for Amex cards or Chase cards, or you're flying an airline like Delta or United, and like really stick to it, because the minute you start kind of spreading yourself thin, it takes a lot longer to kind of really maximize. So that's one. Two, when it's time to actually decide when you want to redeem, plan in advance. The two best times to make redemptions, I get this question all the time, is why can't I find seats? The first best time is really a year before your trip, and the second best time is like 72 hours before your trip, which for many people that's like, okay, I can't do that. Well, then if you can't do that, then be the 1 year ahead. But in the middle is when the airlines and hotels are actually selling their inventory and not frequently discounting it for redemptions. And then three is be informed. I think that a lot of people are still redeem their points for the easy way out, whether that's making a booking directly with, let's say, the Amex travel portal, or heaven forbid, redeeming it for like a gift card or something like that. Those are like the least valuable redemptions in the book. And you really do, being informed and sometimes having a little bit of patience around this and doing some investigation, use AI. I mean, the tools are absolutely not there. It is not perfect. But if you're new to the space, you can learn a lot just by having a conversation with Claude or ChatGPT.
Yeah, those are some great and easily actionable tips that people start implementing today. And you're so right about, you either got to be a planner or a last minute traveler. It seems like you get the most.
Yeah, the last minute travel thing, I get it, especially we're a family, and maybe just because I think about this all day long. It's funny, my wife and I recently went down to Argentina with our daughter, and we didn't have flights until 2 days beforehand. And she's used to this by now. And then she always gets a little jittery by the end. Is like, is this going to happen? Are we going? It will happen. And I'm investigating, what does the seat map look like? Are there a lot of empty seats? Just because that would usually indicate that the airlines would put the flight on as a reward seat. And what are the fares looking like? And I've obviously honed my approach to this over the many years, but that said, especially summertime now, right? There are so many seats to Europe, and not all of them are going to be filled, especially if you're looking in August. It's so funny because I don't know if you have kids or listeners have kids, but school schedules have in most parts of the country, what at least we're hearing is the airlines are saying that they're shifting to like June, July being kind of peak summer, and August now being this like in between time. And it's so much easier to get free flights in August than ever before, which is wild because especially if you're retired or your kid, you don't have kids in school and you have the flexibility to do summer travel around then. I'm telling folks, travel in August, September, October, when the weather's honestly a little bit better in Europe and a lot of the world, and there's free seats available.
Yeah, great point. Let's pause for a moment. What actually brings you joy? It's something most people never think about, yet it shapes how your life unfolds. You're busy. You make responsible choices. You even plan ahead. But have you slowed down long enough to ask if what you're building supports a life you enjoy living? That's the reason I built my YouTube channel, to help you bring more joy to your money journey. Sure, we'll talk about all the essentials, but my real goal is to help you connect your finances with what brings you joy, because money is the tool that funds the moments that matter. If you want to explore that connection more deeply, visit my YouTube channel at Larry Sprung. What industry trends are you most excited about, and what should travelers pay attention to in 2026 and beyond that you see coming down the pike?
So I think there's the good and the bad, right? I think that, for instance, biggest thing everyone's talking about AI, and how do you implement that into the travel journey. And, in many cases, it's a great unlock, right? I've already explained how I think that folks who are newish, even intermediate in the game, can learn a lot just by having, a conversation with an AI agent. But that said, we are seeing travel companies also implement AI in ways that are, really nice for travelers because it helps with, making itineraries and planning trips. But in the same vein, they're using it for revenue maximization. And so that means customizing the fare you see and that you pay because they can create a profile about who you are in a way that they haven't been able to before. And that's a larger trend that we're seeing. Hotels, airlines, they are doing a much better job and focusing very much on customization of package options, of getting you to spend more than you may have, upgrades, things like that. And in a similar vein, in travel, and we're talking about like personal finance, and we're seeing the credit cards also, they have really great intro offers, and they're doing a really good job at this. But what they're also doing is, we saw a lot of this last year, and we're continuing to see this, they're adding so many benefits and perks and coupons and things to these credit cards that, are super valuable for points. But to make it, they're not doing it to make it harder, but they're just making it as, for a lot of people, it feels like it has to be a full-time job to actually maximize these credit cards. And I think trend, that's something that we're just going to see. We continue to see more and more of, not just on the Amex Platinums of the world or the Chase Sapphire Reserves, but on many of kind of their cousins and all the other cards out there. Finally, given this kind of environment, and I know obviously the TSA wait times were a big kind of thing with kind of government shutdowns over the past many months, but just this unpredictability, however you say it, just in travel, just some days the TSA lines are great and some days they're not. And I think that is something that we as a society, especially in a post-COVID world, just almost have to just say, okay, well, this is part of life these days, traveling, and packing a lot of patience is something that I've been telling people to do. I've been telling them to do it for years, but now it matters more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, I've traveled probably 3 or 4 out of the last 6 weeks, and we're talking about right now. We're in early April, where a lot of these TSA issues have taken place, and I will knock wood because I have travel coming up, but we haven't experienced any of that stuff. But I also am knowledgeable that we have certain of the perks that we've gotten through some of these cards. For example, like clear access or digital ID. I know those have been extremely powerful during these times of uncertainty. And a lot of the cards offer these benefits as part and parcel. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess twofold. I think for those who are new here, during kind of the madness and really ongoing, I actually created a free live TSA tracker. I basically pulled together live wait times, checkpoint by checkpoint at 30 plus airports. It's still out there, tsa.fromthetradetable.com. And really what I've seen is, especially now that things have kind of moderated a little bit and gotten a little bit better, is it's really just these peak windows. So kind of the pre 6 a.m. flight rush. And in those cases, even if you have pre-check and digital ID and clear and touchless ID and all the different kind of hacks, you're still waiting in line because you and 50% of the other people have listened to us talk and signed up for the same things. And I think that's something that is just a general kind of supply-demand imbalance when it comes to these perks. And we haven't talked about lounges, for instance, but everyone wants to get into the lounge. No one wants to wait in line. So what can we do as an industry to fix that?
A lot of airlines now are using dynamic pricing, which I think is backdoor tied into the rewards as well. What do people need to know and understand so they don't overpay for airfare when it comes to dynamic pricing?
Yeah, I mean, the trend of dynamic pricing is I'd say it's twofold. I mean, as it relates to award pricing, is what you really see the U.S. airlines doing is basically pegging their currencies to a certain dollar or cents amount and say, okay, well, if a flight is $500, it'll cost, let's say, 50,000 points. And if it's $1,000, it'll cost 100,000 points. There are still some programs. And these are the ones that I really suggest folks to focus on for kind of the best bang for their buck, but they're traditionally kind of what we call award chart based, which is if you're flying from domestic US to domestic US, so just a domestic flight, regardless of where you're going, if there's a seat available and these are capacity controlled, they would be, let's say, 12,500 points or miles, and then if it's in business, it's 25,000 or something, and it's specific. Now, the downside to that is that results in capacity constrained awards because airlines can't discount using these charts every single seat that they sell. So what dynamic pricing is basically a stand-in for is we can then sell many more seats as awards, but the redemption rates are going to be a lot worse. So a few kind of trends to beating this. One is the cheapest fares are often the ones that have the best bang for buck with dynamic pricing. So, even if the flight is $69 or $100 and it looks far less sexy to make a redemption for 10,000 points, odds are that's the better deal than waiting for that business class ticket that costs $2,500 and could cost 500,000 points. So that's the first. The second is, depending, if you do have an Amex card or a Chase card, these cards actually transfer to 15, 20 partners, and the full list is online. And as I said, me and all my friends are posting about ways to use them. But there are still programs out there that you can transfer to that don't have that still use award charts that are fixed rates, and that's when there's the spread between what the cash price is and what the award price is, and the delta there is really kind of the arbitrage opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are still some very good opportunities out there to kind of beat the dynamic pricing, or play it to your favor.
But even if you have the dynamic pricing, right? It's crazy, but I redeem so many more points. I live in New York. My parents live in Florida, and we go down a lot, especially in the winter. I do so much just point redemptions on flights, short, domestic, even between New York and Chicago and DC and Boston. It's these flights are $150, but you can get them for 7,500 points, 9,000 points. And that's far better. One thing we haven't talked about, easy framework, is what I call the CPP. That's cents per point. Every single redemption I make, I am taking the cash cost of that flight or hotel. I am dividing it by the number of points that program requires times by 100. And that'll get you what I call the CPP, or cent per point valuation. And it depends. Every program has different benchmarks, but the higher your CPP, the better deal you're getting. Your points are going further. And, let's just kind of run through three. American, Delta, United, three big airlines. American, I like to redeem as long as it's about 1.4 or so or higher. Delta, I do about 1.1, 1.2, and United about 1.3, 1.4. You beat that in the in the CPP calculation, great, redeem your points. Don't hoard, because what people forget is that airlines, this is not an interest earning asset. If you're hoarding your points, you might as well take cash back from your bank with a credit card and call it a day.
Yeah, they devalue over time for sure.
Yeah.
So, or they change the rules, right?
Exactly, and they're allowed to, which is fine. But but to really be an expert at the game, that's what you got to do.
Yeah. One of the things I speak about often on this show is the power of who, not how, and, not figuring out how to do things, figure out a who that can take care of it. And under that premise, one of the things you've been speaking a lot about recently is Autopilot, which is a travel technology company designed to help users secure the best flight deals. Why are you so passionate about what Autopilot is doing, and how can it help our listeners out?
Yeah. So the first, full disclaimer, I helped Autopilot out in an advisory capacity. But why I'm so excited about it is, airlines dropped change fees back in the day during COVID. And as part of that, if you're buying, the non-basic tickets, what so many people don't realize is that if the price drops between when you booked and when you fly, you can actually get a credit, in some cases a refund, for the difference. And it is a cumbersome process. It's hard to kind of do, and Autopilot automates it. So they're tracking the fares for flights and hotels. And if the price drops, they go and kind of get you the credits that you're due, the savings. They notify you, put it in an easy dashboard, and you're on your way at a lower fare. And, it's free to use. They charge a percentage of savings model, which I think is like the smartest way to do it, because it's like, kind of everyone wins when you win type thing. And it's seamless. Listen, I think the best customer for someone like Autopilot is, maybe not for them, but it'd be really cool if I always booked the cheapest fare. But that's like this kind of craziness where folks are like, oh, you have to book Tuesdays at 6:30 in the morning. And Autopilot eliminates that, because book when you're comfortable, throw it in there, and see if you get a savings. And if not, great, like you booked when the time was right.
Yeah, great points, and sounds like a great tool. I know we use it. We've done that many times where we booked, canceled, rebooked because of theirs being a significant savings at some point, monitoring that. So to have a system doing that for you is a game changer. So, one of the last things I want to talk about is, you've built a large following, and one of the ways you've done that is by breaking down complex topics into actionable insights. And I think that's something that a lot of business owners who have some kind of social media or want to have some kind of social media presence are striving for. What strategies do you find most effective for engaging your audience?
I'm still learning every single day, because it feels like, algorithms and such are changing. But I'd say that a few things. One, consistency is key. I have some weeks, and fortunately I've built kind of the platforms now, but, I have had weeks where, you have 10 videos or 10 posts and they all do incredibly poorly. And it's really deflating, and it sucks. And, especially when it's your livelihood or whatnot, you really want to build it. But just keep pushing through. I think of it all as an investment in training the algorithm and training your accounts. And two, when I think about creating content, I am largely focused on what will the follower or viewer kind of gain from this piece. Will it be educational? Will it be entertaining? Will it be something that they want to save or share? These days, I don't think about likes. I'm thinking largely about, is this shareable? Is this a nugget that people are going to associate with Zach Griff as this was really cool and helpful, and I'm excited to now potentially follow him or engage more with his content?
Yeah. So I'm hearing keep the end in mind is probably most important.
For sure.
So, yeah, thank you for that. So, Zach, it's been a pleasure having you on. And you've brought a lot of joy to our listeners today and shared a lot of actionable insights. And we tie in every one of our shows by asking each of our guests the same joyful last question, and that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Well, it's funny. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I'm this newfound runner, and I'm actually calling in from Florida. I'm at my parents' house, and weather's great. I took a 7-mile run, which is longer than I usually do, but that is the best way for me to get my mind to kind of reset for the day. And that's what I did this morning before we got on the phone.
Sounds like an amazing way to stay in shape and clear the mind. So thank you for sharing.
And get jet lag. People don't realize this. One of my biggest tips for beating jet lag is it doesn't have to be a run. But I go to crazy places. Like I go to Hong Kong for 36 hours, but I am adjusted to the time when I get there because I do an exercise of sorts. In Hong Kong, I'm hiking up Victoria Peak, and in Singapore, I'm running around Marina Bay Sands. I do crazy stuff like that very quick. It could be 30 minutes, but that's how I beat jet lag.
Yeah, I agree. I try to hit the gym every day when I'm on the road for those same reasons. I feel like I feel a lot better.
Yeah.
And I started doing it like 4 or 5 years ago. Never went to a hotel gym before that. And like you said, you don't even have to go to the gym. If it's a nice location, go outside, go for a run, and take advantage of it. So that's great stuff. And Zach, we're going to have all of your information in the show notes along with From the Tray Table. But if people want to know more about what you're doing, more about know more about From the Tray Table, what's the easiest and the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So, Google, really easy. You can type my name, Zach Griff, ZachGriff. You'll get all my social accounts. So I'm on Instagram and TikTok, as well as X, Twitter. And then if you type From the Tray Table, you'll find my newsletter. It's 3 times a week. It's free. It makes you a smarter, better traveler, or at least that's what, all the people who are on it tell me. So I hope to count you on it as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for taking time out of your day to share this with us and educate our listeners. I appreciate it. They appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. And likewise to everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
If today's conversation made you rethink how you travel, how you spend, plan, and experience the world, then you're already one step closer to doing it better. Zach Griff didn't just show us how to find better flights, he showed us how to take control in a system designed to confuse us and turn it into something that creates more freedom, more experiences, and of course, more joy. That's what this show is all about, helping you make smarter decisions so you can live a life filled with purpose, confidence, and meaningful experiences. Zach Griff and everything he's up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.